Well, hello there. Welcome back. We are here at WPPI for the Icon Award critique sessions here. I'd like to start by saying my name's Michelle Celantano. I'll be hosting this particular panel today. We're very grateful to B&H Photo and to Critiq for helping to sponsor these sessions. Today, I am lucky enough to have with me Alison, Carlino, and Andre Brown. Seriously, this is an amazing panel. When I saw you guys on my list today, I nearly pooped myself. But okay, we're going to talk about prints today that scored 79 or below, and how our expert panel here can help give tips to help the makers improve on the images we're going to see today. The images we're going to see today are going to be really fun because we're in camera artistry for one, the wedding category, and then the open category. So I'm kind of excited to see what's going to pop up in camera artistry. Also, don't forget, if you are interested in the inaugural Icon Award Collection Book 2023, it has over 700 photos from 356 photographers, 200 pages. You can get that at iconawards.com, and I think it's going to be a classic, being the first book for the Icon Awards. So we'll get started. Alison, do you want to say a little something about yourself? Tell the audience at home where about yourself real quick.
Hey, y'all. I'm Alison Carlino from Sugar Land, Texas, and this is my 20th WPPI. So I'm so excited. This industry truly raised me, and I'm thrilled to be back here judging and teaching and mentoring again this year, and excited to help some makers bring up their work and get up to that award status today.
All right, Mr. Andre Brown.
Hey, what's up, guys? My name is Andre Brown. I am a wedding and portrait photographer from Atlanta. This is not my 20th year at WPPI. I think this is number 5 for me, but I enjoy the process. I come for this. I come for the print competition. So looking forward to helping other people raise their scores up and become award winners.
You're just a wee lad there, Andre. This is my 28th year at WPPI. Were you even born 28 years ago?
Very much so.
Okay, fine.
Not as young as I look.
I'll let that slide. All right, guys, I'm super excited about this category. So go ahead and push the next button on your laptop right there. Yep. And so again, this is in camera artistry. Nothing has been done to these images once they're out of the camera. So this is open and wedding category. So we're going to see a bunch of everything. Guys, start talking about this. This is fun.
Okay. I appreciate, first of all, the black and white. That's a cool idea. Okay. I think that to elevate this image, the first thing I'm noticing would be to work with your expression a little bit more, maybe give her a little bit more of, it looks like her hair is flying in the wind, right? Well, that's part of the scene, but she needs more emotion with it. I think this is more of a fashion shot to where maybe a little bit more fancy free and a little bit motion with it. And then with the pose, you want to make sure that you are not shooting up into the crotch of a woman. I know that it's shadowed there and it's darker fabric, obviously, and it's helping that area, but turn the knees, keep the knees on different levels, keep the shoulders on different levels like you've already done. You've got a great handle on that. I love how you put the head toward the shoulder as well. So maybe turn the body and work with the expression some more.
Awesome. Andre, some thoughts for the maker?
Yeah, to go a little bit further, like with the pose, that was the first thing that stood out to me, right? The pose itself is a little stiff. So if we look at the camera right arm, it's just like a little bit stiff, right? Being able to go in and create some motion and also create a little bit more separation between that arm and where the thigh is. That shadow that's on the leg can be a bit distracting, and maybe if you got a little bit more light in there, it would have lightened that area up quite a bit more.
Awesome. It's really kind of interesting because in this category, we can't talk about post. Usually you could tone that down in post, you can do that, but this is in camera artistry. So that's a really cool, which I think, coming from a film photographer it's a different level, knowing it's got to all be done in camera. So great comments. Next image. Andre, do you want to get started on this one?
Let me take a little further look in here. First, let me say I like the play on the composition, right? So I know we're talking about how to get it up, but it's on the third and it's a little bit, skewed, right? And it's also in the lower third. and it's framed within the tree. So kudos to you there with that, right? Um, Maybe being able to deal with the highlights a little bit more, bring that down. That
It's
way,
in camera.
I know, but I'm like, you know, take,
So in your exposure. So you're talking
yeah,
exposure then.
yeah,
Yeah.
bring that exposure down, right? Because obviously it's not a silhouette, right? So, you know, the sky is still the brightest part of the overall image. And we want to be able to focus on them, especially with the way that you frame them. You have that branch on the left side that's pointing to them. So you almost have leading lines in there as well, right? So I think compositionally there's some great things, but you know, even the pose with the gentleman, they're like he's too hidden inside of the umbrella, whereas the female in there, she can like she's exposed. We can see who she is and what she looks like.
Allison, some thoughts?
Yeah, to add to what he said, I appreciate that the makers found this open spot of composition space to place the couple in. So nicely seen there in the environment. I would advise you, lighting wise, to match the lighting on the groom's face as you have on the bride's. So maybe add a reflector off to the side to be able to pump some light in on his face because he's completely shadowed at this point. And then also maybe engage the couple. I think we're missing some emotion between them here. Maybe use their fingers and touch fingers or touch hands. Give us a little bit more of a story between the two as in love.
Yeah, that's really good. Really good advice. And our next image. So there's definitely a lot going on here that you guys can talk about. Allison, do you want to get started?
Yeah, I appreciate the use of color with the red curtain and the dress, and you've really worked on making sure that the color wheel is shown well here and complements in the back. I like that you added the feather to it as well. So a couple things to help this one go up a little bit higher. The first thing I'm noticing is that arm and that wrist is very angular for such a feminine girl with a beautiful bow, a headband and a gorgeous legs showing and that dress. It's very angular and very harsh. So her wrist is looks disjointed right there. Her shoulder's also straight into camera. So I would say roll that bone back and reposition the arm. And then possibly take the light up a little bit higher. The loop shadow that's coming off of her nose is just not quite high enough. And then that way you can have the shadows fall a little bit lower below her nose.
So the light's not high enough to bring the shadow down. Yep. Andre?
And then also too, and maybe I just can't see because but because of the screen that we're on, I don't really see catch light. So the eyes are a little bit dead to me.
There's a tiny catch light in
tiny
there. I
catch
can
light
zoom
in
in.
there?
There's a tiny catch
Okay.
light at the top. Yep.
Got it. Yeah. So, but the eyes are they look a little bit dead. We already talked about the pose, but I think that the framing itself is framed more like it was a person who took a picture on their cell phone versus capturing a portrait with thought and intention, if that makes sense.
Let me just ask you about lens choice here. Do you think a different lens choice would have helped the overall image?
100%. I'm big on compression, so I try to shoot as close to the longest part of my lens as humanly possible, so that we don't get that distortion. And the framing issue that I'm talking about, I think, could be handled maybe with a longer lens or maybe at a tighter focal length. Step back and shooting the subject direct on, as opposed to that cell phone kind of top down perspective that was captured.
Yeah, that's a great comment. Thank you very much. Okay, we'll go to our next image. For those of you at home, we are in the open creative and wedding creative category, which are in-camera artistry. So these images are straight out of camera. And I just want to thank B&H and Critiq for sponsoring these icon critique sessions. And who wants to get started with this image?
All right, I commend the maker on finding the one shaft of light, natural light that's coming through that area right there. It's beautifully seen. I love that you turned her body away from the light and her head back in. And you've taken time to pose her leg in a way that's 90 degree to the camera in the front. You've showed the connection with the couple. That's beautifully done. So your problems here, I think Andre would agree with me, is that you've got overexposure in the gown. So you got to control those highlights on that dress, especially with her being the brightest part of the image where the eye is going. You need to control your highlights. But it was beautifully posed and well seen with that light.
Andre?
The biggest thing in this image from the beginning is I don't know what that object is down in the front, right?
It looks
That-
like a piece of cement or like a walkway. Yep.
stone, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So that is like my attention goes there, even though she's the brightest part of the frame. My eye is going there, and it's a very distracting element. On top of the fact that the composition is off. The shot looks like it was meant to be intentionally with them in the center, but it's not. They're not in the actual center of the frame. So you got to watch your composition, and especially when you're just off like that, just pay attention so that you can nail it in camera.
So do you think a lower camera angle or camera height or just the maker moving one direction or another would help eliminate that distraction in the foreground? Because obviously they can't take it out in post.
100%.
So they're in camera now. Which way do they step? What do they do to avoid that distraction, Andre?
Depending on what that is, so let's say that it's an object that's elevated because we can't really tell from that perspective, then I would definitely just raise the tilt of my camera up to get just under their feet with the not too tight, right? But just under their feet enough to be able to get rid of that completely and be sure that my composition is framed with them in the center.
Great point. It's always helpful to like point out how you could avoid that distraction in camera. So I appreciate that thought. Okay, our next image. Wow, this is really interesting. There's some really great angles in this image, right? Like my eye is like going towards all these different angles. What do you think, Andre?
So I can appreciate what's going on with the framing, right? So let's start there. We have the first part of the frame from this window pane of the booth that's kind of framing her out, and then the phone itself is actually adding a frame around her face, which I can appreciate. But I think the most obvious thing is the overexposure of the image. Again, we want to be able to get that exposure down. I'm not sure, maybe ISO was a little bit high in this set of circumstances. Just bring it down a little bit so that we can control the highlights as much as possible.
That's great. Thank you. Alison, what do you think?
I enjoy how the maker used framing in a frame
Yeah.
as composition. I think that the bottom third of this, if you hold your hand up, and you don't need the bottom hand, if you would have cropped like right under that red bar and brought us even closer in, that bottom hand doesn't really tell us anything. It's not helping to the story, and it's cropped in an awkward place as it is. So a closer crop would bring us frame in frame. And then I'm looking for more expression. If she's on the phone and, she just looks like she's so bored. So a little bit more of it, maybe raise the eyebrows like she's talking to the person on the phone, or breathe through the lips and exhale. And possibly with that shadow that's going over the camera left eye, work to make me put the eye in the bullseye in that open spot instead of slicing the pupil in half there. That would have been cool on that side.
Yeah, that's some great advice. I love it. All right. And we'll go to our next image. So this is a really interesting use of light and shadow. Alison, what would you say to the maker in order to elevate this to something that would hit an 80 category?
Yeah, in order to elevate this, I would suggest that you work on your focus. I know that they're pretty close to the wall here, it looks, because I can see the bottom down here in the left corner. So your focus was really shadow. It looks like your shadow is sharp and your couple's out of focus. So I think because the real humans are such a major part of this image and such a big part of it, your eye goes there and it's all blurry and it looks odd. They are underexposed as well. So you're going to want to watch your exposure there.
Just a quick question. Do you think if this was captured in black and white in camera that it would have more impact?
I believe so, especially with the shadow idea. Mm-hmm. I think that black and white would drive this home, and I would quit looking at how pretty that pink dress is.
Right.
I love that you kept space between their heads, though. Kudos on that.
Andre?
I can't really add too much more to that, but what I will say, inside of this shadow, there's right down in the bottom portion of it, you can see the split of where they are, right? I think tilting the camera up a little bit more to get rid of that and only really focusing on the top half of them, kissing in the frame, would take this up a notch as well. And quite possibly maybe even add a little bit of his face and her face on the other side to kind of tie the two, the shadow and them together a little bit more.
So just slightly different camera angle.
Yeah.
I like it. That's awesome. All right, our next image. Again, for those of you at home, this is our in-camera artistry, and we are looking at wedding and open category. All right. Allison, some thoughts on this?
Really applaud the maker for doing something bold with some off-camera flash in a cool position. I enjoy the fact that the colors kind of play off of each other there. I think that to help this go higher, I mean, I'm going to talk about the posing that leave you something as well to talk about with the other part. But the posing part, yes, she has to be perfect on her technique, and that's her priority. But you need to work with your model here and coach them to make sure that the arm is either lower or the head's a little higher, because we have lost her head completely. She can do that technique in that form without losing her head.
That's a great point. Andre?
Yeah, and and I talk about it a lot because I'm very sensitive to it, but composition, right? So if we look at the overall frame, it appears that it is compositionally correct, but we can look at the lines inside of the actual image and see that it's intended to be centered, but it's not quite centered. And had you got that light behind her to rim it, put a rim light around her versus being so prominent in the frame, it might have given us a completely different, view of what was actually going on in the scene.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if you guys noticed, but there is a figure on camera right.
Yeah.
So cropping in camera a little bit more just to crop that person out, because I'm pretty sure they're not part of the overall design of this particular
100%.
image. So just being careful for that. When you're entering in print competition, it's a little bit different than images that are going to sell to a client. So this dancer will probably love this image. She would want to hang it on her wall. But when we're entering print competition, our judges are going to be looking for things that are distracting in the frame that don't need to be there. And even for in-camera artistry, it's really just taking a step in or taking your camera and zooming in just a little further in order to avoid that particular distraction. But overall, great comments, you guys. Anything else you want to add before we close?
Yeah, the lighting's really flat on her. So in order to show the muscles and give us a little bit more dimensionality, consider removing that light over to camera left side and maybe adding a grid, and so that way it doesn't spill on the concrete as much.
So a little bit more control of the light. Yeah, for sure. Awesome. All right. Let's go to our next image. A great wedding image. You know what I think is interesting for an in-camera artistry image where people are in a church, there are no phones sticking out in the aisle. Right? Like, honestly, like, it's such a thing today, right? I don't think I can see any wedding images in a church now that don't have somebody on a cell phone sticking out.
I can top you on that. On Saturday's wedding in Houston, Texas, the preacher told them, put your phones away. And I stood up there and he said, they paid her. It was great.
I love that.
It was great.
They paid her. I
But
love
you're
that.
right. You see it everywhere.
Everywhere. So it's so almost kind of sad that the first thing when I'm looking at this image, I was like, kudos to them. There are no phones in this picture. Anyways, let's talk about the technique of this image and,
To get this capture on the run and gun during a wedding day, you already knew that you were going to have a reflection. You had to be low. Your composition is bullseye. This is a beautiful capture. I would have been thrilled with this.
Yeah.
And Andre, can you comment on how they could have brought this up?
I don't really have too much to add. I will say, as somebody who does a lot of lower perspective shots, I think this image would have been stronger had it been horizontal to create more of a leading line. You would have still gotten that same reflection off the top of the ceiling as well, but I think it would have had more impact had it been a horizontal image versus the vertical image.
Yeah, I can see what you're saying. A lot of times, for those of you at home, judges you'll see us sit like this with our hands above and below or kind of squaring off images, and it's just so that we can see what a different crop might look like. A lot of times, I think when you're looking at images for print competition, what I learned very early on was when you're considering a print, before you enter it, turn it upside down. Turn the whole thing upside down, and then look at it, and then look to see what stands out to you the most. Because when you see it from a completely different perspective, that will really help you decide whether or not it's right for competition or where you might want to crop it. So I think, Andre, maybe just cropping out some of those super bright lights on the bottom of the floor would bring your attention more to that couple in the center.
Yeah, I mean, I can see what they were trying to do, or like
Yep.
maybe pulling that ceiling in, but had it been horizontal, at least the ones that are closest to
Right.
the camera would have been completely gone, and you would have had more drama and impact across the entire scene.
Yeah. Yeah, appreciate that comment. And just, from a former recovering wedding photographer, that is a great image to get on the wedding day. Yeah. And obviously it's during the ceremony because there's people in the pews, so that's awesome. All right, our next image. She's doing it. She's doing the hand thing. So give us some thoughts, Allison. I'm feeling like you're going to talk about some cropping.
Absolutely, I am. I mean, you can't help but not look at his face in the teacup first. So you really drew us in. Kudos on that. The story is there. I want to stay lost in this and figure out his outfit and all of it. So great job on story. A closer crop. If you're doing this in camera, I don't need to see most of the top of this image. Definitely the floor where your floor drop sweeps out, the light stand. If you would have cropped this in, I already wouldn't have been able to focus on those things. Unfortunately, the highlight on the light stand really draws my eye out of the frame and down away from his face. So closer crop, first of all.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, those I think are the obvious elements. So we have the I don't know if it's an ice light over there to the left, the stand that's on. There's like a lamp at the top, right? And then whatever that's going on in the back part of the scene, it's pretty distracting. I don't know if there's a light back there or something, and it's a completely different color temperature than the light that is on your actual subject. So it just creates like this imbalance in the image. Yeah, tighter crop, and be aware of distracting elements in the background as well.
Yeah, in camera does mean it needs to be raw, but guys, think about how to finish this.
Right.
Crop, get your body in closer, zoom in closer, and think about how to make this a real good raw image.
So my question is, did the maker do it all on purpose? Right? Like, because there is so much going on. You can see that source of light in the frame. You can see that carpet in the frame. You can see, like, did the maker actually want to portray the feeling of the photographer looking at the subject and seeing the items that are in the image and not having it cropped in perfectly? I'm wondering if it's intentional.
I think if it was intentional, there would be more light down there in the bottom to tell the story.
Yeah.
Because I can't tell what's down there on the pillow, or it's a bag?
Yeah.
See, I wish I could tell more about it. And if that's the case, you should have lit more so we could understand.
It shows a little devil's advocate here, Was it done on purpose? Yeah. Awesome, guys. Really awesome. All right, our next image. Wow, I dig this image. Yeah.
Yeah, I really like this image. I mean, the triangle shape, which is obviously moving your eye from one side to the next. The leading lines, obviously on the actual subject. I think the only critique that I would have for this image was to move who I'm assuming dad is a little bit closer and make him more connected, like the bride and mom are. And that's the only critique that I can really add to it personally.
Yeah, so for such a grand moment of they're finished with their hair and makeup, the dresses are on, we've found the light, we're going to put them in a cool symmetrical area. I think what you're missing here is Yes, you tilted the heads together to show me some emotion, but their hands are down by their side. And I wish those ladies would have been embracing each other, or mama would have been touching the bride's face gently and brought some hands. Hands can express so much, guys, and they can be so emotive. And when you leave them down in the scene, it's like you didn't finish the thought.
Yeah.
So use the hands.
I definitely think kudos to the maker for, seeing this shape, figuring out how to use the shape and creating almost that diagonal line with the subject's heads. And I think for me, really having mom's face turn out a little bit more, her expression looks a little lost, like she's looking down and not quite connected. So in the last final moment of posing that mom, just have her turn her face out a little bit more so we could see a little bit more of her face. But that'd be it. But that's that's one of those images as a wedding photographer, recovering wedding photographer. You say, wow, I wish I would have taken that one. All right, next image. A lot going on here for you guys. Got water elements and different colors, and let's talk about it. Andre, some thoughts?
So first expression, right? So I'm not quite sure, what's going on. Obviously, she's probably keeping her mouth closed so she doesn't drown with the water going in her mouth, right? But at the end of the day, it's still a capture. We have to be sure that their facial expression is emotive and it helps tell the story as well.
Okay, love the fact that you've gelled things purple in the back. I know that you're trying to play with color and bring all that fun color she's wearing in, or if it's a purple spotlight or uplight, whatever it is. I think a closer crop on top would help. But what I'm really noticing that would help this move into another category is the hands in the front are very flat and heavy, and they're foreshortened, right? So anything that's closest to the lens is going to look distorted. Same way if it's too far away. So your hand looks like a claw on him as well as a claw on her. I thought this was a maternity shot at first when I looked at it. So hands, once again, are very expressive, and the flat side or the palm side is usually the heavier fat side. You want to turn it to the side and show pinky and show this the slimmer side of the hand. So work with your hand posing on that, and perhaps lift his head up a little bit more, turn her head back into him, and work with them on expression, like Andre mentioned.
Yeah, for sure. I also thought potential maternity when I first saw this, and yeah, so it is a little confusing. I mean, I think as storytellers, we really want to be able to tell a story with a photograph that the viewer is going to be able to understand or want to dive more into. Sometimes it gets a little bit too confusing, and I feel like in this case, the story is a little confusing for the viewer, and so a little bit more clarity on what story you're trying to tell here would be really awesome. All right, let's move on to the next image. So for those, again, at home, this is in-camera artistry, which means that there's no post-processing done on these images at all. It's what's been captured in the camera. And we're here with Alison and Andre, who are giving us critiques on these images today. And give us some thoughts on this one.
I commend the maker on catching such a beautiful moment with the symmetry of the two of them on the sides and then the glasses in the middle. You caught a great moment there. They genuinely look happy too with their expressions. So nice job on catching that. Whether it's journalistic or you asked them to do it, you caught the moment there. I think if you're going to elevate this, think about this. This is more of a snap as a detail for an album and not quite something that would place for awards. I think that this is more of a supporting element and not a star. So in order to isolate that, you could use a different lens choice. You could change the lighting. You could clean up the color on their face and work on, maybe turning off some of the lights in the background to kind of it's so busy. You can see so much in the room around them. So consider a different lens choice, which would really compress the distance like a long lens, and then back up and then just isolate the couple with a low aperture. And then maybe it would die down some of the room in the back.
Andre?
Yeah, I definitely agree with the suggestion for lens choice. But my thought process went in a completely different direction. One, let me point out one, the image is not sharp. So we want to be sure that we nail focus, right? Maybe, no, it's not the shot glass, it's not the wine glasses either, right? but they aren't sharp, and they're the largest part of what's going on. So maybe if you wanted the dramatics of this, use a wider lens, tilt up more in the crop so that we use the light source that's at the top, and pull your exposure down and almost take this into more of a rim light situation on your subject, and maybe turn it black and white to make that highlight on the faces after you got the correct exposure on the faces and made this a little bit more dramatic.
Yeah, I think with in-camera artistry and like something photojournalistic feeling like this, when there are a lot of distractions in the background and that blue light is popping from the back, there's like two different color blues popping from the center, that really utilizing that black and white is a way to go. And I love what you said about really dialing down that exposure so that the part to us would be darker, and then you would get more rim light on their faces. I think that is some stellar advice right there. So I hope whoever made this print got to see this and get an opportunity to shoot something like this again. And words of Andre Brown. All right. Next image. This is really fun too. Alison, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I'm drawn in. Obviously, you are playing with the frames on the wall in the back, with the frames in the front. I mean, there's a lot going on, but you do draw our eye right to her being the brightest part of the image. I am catching some overexposure on her skin as well as on the frame. So unfortunately, the brightest part is probably the overexposure on the gold. It keeps pulling me away. You did well with her gown. I think that the light is just a bit too flat. I really think that it suffers from, you might have been a little bit nervous about having a shadow created with the frame, maybe having her lean forward into the frame a little bit more. I feel like she's almost standing back with her shoulders and leaning back, which is not doing her any favors posing wise.
Yeah, 100%. I agree. Leaning into the frame, the pose, outside of the exposure, the pose itself is what I think is hurting. If we look at the camera left side, the way that arm is kind of awkwardly tucked into the body, it doesn't have the same energy that's on the right side of the frame where the arm is extended and bent, right? That and everything else I agree with what Alison said.
So you think bringing up that the subject's right arm, our camera left, up, say, to the top of that frame would give it a more dynamic angle and elongate her arm a little bit just in the pose?
Yeah, 100%. Because even with the frame itself, it's skewed. So they wanted some dynamics with it.
Right.
We have the frames in the back that are completely straight, and this one is skewed a little bit more. If we had that same energy with the actual pose itself, I think it would have stood out a lot more.
I definitely like that idea. I also think perhaps that this one major light source is a little bit too big for the subject, and could have been a smaller light source with a little bit more control on the subject's face, really toning down everything else by using a grid or a smaller light source. So in terms of lighting, trying to figure out what exactly do you want to highlight and how do I do that without flooding the entire image with light? And I think that's really when mastery starts to come into an image and the lighting really starts to take effect. So play with your lighting. And I mean, I would definitely revisit this concept and just change a couple of things and see where it goes. So great advice. All right, let's go to our next image. A silhouette done in camera, really, not always an easy thing to do and maintain that highlight shadow.
Absolutely. This is beautifully ethereal. It's got that ethereal feeling to it. I keep looking at her hair. Her hair is so cool. I like how the hair echoes with the curves and the curves of the fabric at the bottom. So that's kind of a nice play on. I do enjoy how you've got the knees posed at different levels and the ankles on different planes. I think the left side of the image, where all the way to the camera left, where you have the window pane that's tiny and then the long one, I think probably cropping that in. I feel like I'm pulled out on that because it's so long over there. I'm not sure that little piece is adding anything to it. So maybe a little closer crop. And then you want to watch that she gets away with it but her bicep flat onto her breast line right there is flattening the arm and putting that shoulder straight into the camera. So perhaps consider putting the back hand on top of the belly and then bringing that forward hand maybe closer to the fabric, breaking the wrist and holding it up like this, or even putting it on the back, the small of the back, and making another triangle out there. Because if you had a triangle on the back and then a triangle on your knees or your legs, that would be an opposite triangle effect, and that would be really cool.
Yeah, that would also mimic an opposite triangle in that square, right? Like if her elbow is pulled back, you'd have a diagonal line right to that window.
Right. I'm on the pose mainly as well. I think had you had the subject use the arm that's closest to camera to brace themselves on the stool and kind of lean back a little bit, and then use the hand on the opposite side to go across the top of the belly, it would have added a little bit more sensuality to the pose. We would have exposed the bump a little bit more in the front, created more shape, the S curve from top to bottom all the way down to the floor. And I would have just completely also just kind of reframed the image to get rid of that pain on the right hand side and only fill the frame with the panes that window panes that is
Right.
that are similar to one another. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that right pane with the dark in it takes away from the other ones. So yeah, I can totally see that. I think honestly, this is really nicely done for in-camera artistry and maintaining detail and all of that. Like kudos to the maker. Just a couple of tweaks if this is a location that you're normally at and you have an opportunity to do something like this again. Just some really simple things to keep in mind. But overall, really well done. I think for me, and maybe you can agree, entering an in-camera artistry division might just be the scariest. It's like going out in public naked. You know what I mean? Like when you take your images and you can enhance them and you can do the retouching and then you can tweak it and make it what you want and you send it out into the world dressed. But in-camera artistry is going out into the world a little bit naked. So kudos to the photographers that enter this particular category because I think it might be the most scary. I want to thank you guys for hanging out with us today very, very much. I love you both so much. I know you for a million years. Well, I know you for a million years. You about 5. Right? Anyway, thank you so much to the Icon Awards for having us today. Thank you again to B&H for sponsoring these critiques. Thank you to Critiq. If you have not checked out Critiq, it's a really amazing app where you can literally get critiques on all kinds of things that you're doing. And we used it for the Icon Awards to do video critiques of all of the images that were requested for critiques. And you could see all of the judges' faces and we could draw on it and really give you like awesome nitty gritty advice on your images. So it's a great app and we're grateful that they're also part of the sponsorship. Don't forget, this is the first year, the inaugural book for the Icon Awards. Check out iconawards.com. Get the book for this year. And we'll be back with some more of these. And I'm Michelle Celantano, and that's a wrap for us today. Thank you, Alison and Andre. Thank you, guys. See you guys at home.